The marketplace smelled of smoke, metal, and despair. Traders shouted prices for broken machines, rare alien fruits, and tired animals. But in the darkest corner, near the waste barrels, sat something or someone no one wanted. A thin alien woman wrapped in a dirty, torn cloak. Sat motionless against the wall. Her skin was pale blue, marked with faded bruises and old scars. Her long silver hair was tangled, covering her face like a curtain. People walked past her without looking. Some kicked dust toward her. Some laughed. Useless thing, one merchant scoffed. She can't even look up. She had no name, no number, not even a price tag. The auctioneers didn't bother with her anymore. She had been sitting there for days. No food, no water, no words. When asked where she came from, the sellers just shrugged. Someone dumped her here at night. Maybe from a failed breeding lab, maybe just a runaway. No one cared to know. No one cared at all until a human man walked into the market. He wasn't tall or rich-looking, just a traveler with dusty boots and a tired face. His name was Duran, a cargo hauler. He came looking for machine parts. For his old ship parked outside town, he walked past the usual booths, checked tools, haggled over prices, but then his eyes drifted to the corner and froze. There she was, sitting like a broken statue. Too still, too silent. Something about her pulled at him, though he didn't know why. Maybe it was the way her hands clutched the cloak like she was trying to disappear. But maybe it was the way her head stayed down, as if she feared even breathing. Too loud, he stepped closer. She didn't move. He squatted near her and gently set down his bag. "Hey," he said softly. "Are you hurt?" Still no answer. Just a quiet shiver ran through her body, like his voice had touched something inside her. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small bottle of water. He placed it on the ground between them. "Not too close. You don't have to talk," he said. "Just drink, if you want." Slowly, one of her fingers moved. Just one finger, trembling, reaching, but then a loud laugh broke the moment. A fat alien trader waddled over, grinning. "You want that thing? Take her. Free garbage." With every purchase, more laughter followed from nearby sellers. "She can't work, can't breed, can't talk. Waste of space." Darren stood up, anger flashing in his eyes. "She's not garbage," he said, voice calm but sharp. The trader rolled his eyes. "Whatever, human, you really want her? Fine, she's yours. No charge. She has no chip, no code, no name. She's not registered, so don't blame me when she breaks." Darren looked down at her again. He could walk away, forget this strange moment, but something inside him refused. He crouched again and held out his hand. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you out of here." She didn't move for a long time. The market noise faded in the background. Time seemed to pause. Then her hand moved, slow and shaking. She touched his fingers like they were fire, then gripped them tightly. Her hood slipped slightly and people nearby gasped. Under the hood, her face was delicate but bruised. But it wasn't the bruises that shocked them, it was her eyes, silver and gold, glowing faintly. Unlike anything seen in years, a forgotten species. Thought extinct or wiped out. Rumors of survivors had floated through dark markets and slave rings, but never confirmed. Darren didn't care about the rumors. He only saw a scared, broken woman. Holding his hand like it was her last hope, he helped her to her feet. She was light. Too light, like she hadn't eaten in days. She stumbled once, and he caught her gently. "You're safe now," he whispered, though he knew it was a promise he might not be able to keep. The alien woman didn't reply, but for the first time, she looked at him, really looked at him, and something deep in her shattered soul began to stir. She didn't know his name, and he didn't know hers, but that was the moment everything changed. That was the moment. She was no longer trash. The cargo hauler rumbled gently through the dusty sky. Inside, everything was quiet. Darren sat in the pilot's seat, eyes fixed on the path ahead, behind him. The alien woman sat curled in the corner of the small hold. She hadn't spoken a word since they left the market. She hadn't asked where they were going. She hadn't asked who he was. Duran glanced at her through the rear camera screen. She still clutched the thin, tattered cloak around her like armor. Her knees were pulled to her chest, face hidden. He sighed softly and turned back to the controls. He wasn't sure what he was doing. He just knew he couldn't leave her there. Not like that. Not among people who didn't even see her as alive. Hours passed and the ship drifted over mountains and forests. Darren made a quick stop at a refueling station. He brought back some food, nothing fancy, just soft bread and warm broth. He placed it near her, careful not to startle her, then stepped back to give her space. She didn't touch it at first, but later, when she thought he wasn't looking, her hand moved. She sniffed the food carefully, then took a small bite. Her eyes darted to the front of the ship, checking if he was watching. He pretended not to notice, but deep inside, he smiled. It was a start. That night, Darren set up his sleeping mat on the floor of the hold. He left her the cot near the wall, what's small, but better than cold metal. She didn't move toward it. She stayed, sitting, wide awake. Watching him from behind her hair, he didn't speak, just lay down, eyes closing slowly. The soft hum of the ship filled the silence. In the middle of the night, Duran stirred. He didn't open his eyes, but he felt a presence, not threatening, just watching. When he peeked through half-closed lids, he saw her standing over him. Her head was tilted slightly, eyes studying his face. She didn't blink, didn't move, just watched. Like she couldn't understand why someone would sleep beside her without fear. After a while, she turned away and returned to her corner. The next morning, Duran didn't say anything about it. He just handed her a fresh cup of tea. She took it this time, hands trembling as she sipped slowly. Still no words, but again it was a step forward. Later, while fixing a loose panel near the back of the hauler, Darren caught her doing something unexpected. She had found a cloth and was quietly wiping the dusty shelves. Her movements were slow, but careful. She looked over when she noticed him watching and froze. "I didn't ask you to do that," he said gently. "But thank you." She didn't answer, but her lips twitched slightly, like she wanted to speak, but had forgotten how. By the fifth day, Darren finally heard her voice. It was soft, almost broken. "Why?" He turned slowly, surprised. "Why?" She looked at him, eyes full of confusion and pain. "Why did you take me?" He stepped closer, sat down a few feet away from her. "Because no one else did," he said. "Because you looked like you needed help." She stared at the floor, thinking hard. "No one helps people like me," she whispered. "Then those people are wrong," Darren replied without hesitation. "You're not a thing. You're not garbage. You're someone." Her shoulders trembled at those words, like no one had ever said them to her before. Or maybe she had just forgotten what kindness sounded like. That night, something changed. She didn't sit in the corner. She sat closer, near the center of the ship, where the lights were warmer. Darren didn't push her, didn't ask questions. He just let her be. He gave her space, but not distance. He gave her food, but not demands. He gave her silence, but not coldness. And slowly, she began to come alive again. She didn't smile. Not yet. But once, while Darren was humming an old Earth tune while repairing a wire, she tilted her head and listened. When he stopped, she whispered, "That sound. It's soft," he chuckled. "It's called music." "Music," she repeated, like the word was new. Then, after a long pause, she whispered something that made Duran pause completely. "My name was once Rena." he turned toward her slowly. "Rena," he repeated. Testing the sound, she nodded once, as if unsure whether she was allowed to have a name again. "Well, Rena," he said gently, "welcome aboard." Hush. For the first time since he found her, she looked him in the eyes without fear. There was still pain, still confusion, but also a flicker of something else, hope. The desert wind howled outside the hauler as it crossed the drylands. Duran adjusted the ship's stabilizers while Rena sat silently nearby. It had been 2 weeks since she spoke her name. Since then, she had said little, but she had begun. To help, she cooked simple meals, cleaned the control panels, and once even fixed a broken vent. Duran didn't ask how she knew ship systems, he figured. There were many things she hadn't told him yet, and that was okay. They flew low over a barren stretch known as the Wastes. No law, no watchtowers. Just dust and danger. Most people avoided it, but Darren had a delivery to make. A shipment of tools and medicine to a small village on the other side. "It'll be quick," he said. "Then we'll move on to greener places." Rena nodded quietly, eyes distant. She didn't trust open skies or quiet lands. Too many memories lived there. As the sun dipped low, Darren noticed something strange on the scanner. 3 fast-moving dots behind them. Closing in, he frowned, tapping the screen. "Speeders," he muttered. "And they're not friendly." Rena's body stiffened without a word. She stepped behind the pilot seat, her breathing low and steady. She wasn't scared, she was calculating. The 3 speeders pulled up beside them. Dusty bikes with armored riders. One had a glowing shock lance, another carried a plasma shotgun. The third waved a rusted blade, grinning wildly. They signaled Duran to land. He cursed under his breath and brought the hauler down fast. Dust kicking up around them. "They're raiders," he said. Grabbing a wrench and sliding a small knife into his boot, "I'll handle this, stay inside." But as he opened the hatch, Rena followed silently. The leader of the raiders jumped down from his speeder, his armor clinking. Well, what do we have here?" The man smirked, "A lone hauler and... what's this?" His eyes locked on Rena, and something dark lit in them. "Didn't expect to see her kind again," he said, licking his lips. "Bet the labs would pay nicely for a return." Darren stepped forward, putting himself between them. "She's not for sale," he said flatly. The raiders laughed. "Not up to you, friend." The second raider growled, raising his weapon. "We'll take the cargo. The ship and her. And maybe we'll leave your body behind." Before Duran could react, the third raider lunged. Duran swung his wrench hard-clank metal hit armor. But it wasn't enough. The raider grabbed him, slammed him against the hauler's wall. Duran groaned, dropping his weapon, stunned, and then Rena moved. Like lightning, she sprinted forward, her cloak flying behind her. Her hands blurred as she struck the raider's wrist, twisting until bone cracked. The weapon fell. She ducked a punch, rolled forward, and drove her elbow into his throat. The man choked and fell gasping to the sand. The others froze in shock. Rena turned to them, breathing hard. Her gold-silver eyes glowing. "No more," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Never again." The leader tried to rush her with the shock lance. She dodged, grabbed the pole. Midair, twisted, he flipped onto his back. The wind knocked out of him. She stood over him, hand raised ready to strike again, but she stopped, trembling, her whole body shaking. Memories flashed in her mind, screams, cages, trainers yelling, the sound of obedience collars snapping shut. Darren sat up, blood on his lip, and looked at her. "Rena," he called softly. She turned, still shaking. "You're not there anymore," he said. "You don't have to be that person." She dropped the weapon, eyes wide with pain. The leader scrambled away, his men limping after him. They left their speeders behind and ran into the desert. Cowards, defeated by a woman they thought was broken. Rena fell to her knees, hands covering her face. "I didn't want to hurt," she cried, voice raw. "I didn't want to remember." Daron crawled over and knelt beside her. He didn't speak right away. He just placed a hand on her back. Warm and steady. "You protected me," he said at last. "You protected yourself, too." They sat in the sand as the twin moons rose above. The desert. The silence wasn't empty, it was healing. Rena wiped her eyes and looked at him. "I was trained to fight," she admitted, "not for choice, for control." He nodded slowly. "You chose this time." Her eyes filled again, but this time with something softer. She had chosen not because someone ordered her, but because someone mattered. Back in the ship, Darren brought her a blanket and made tea. Rena sat quietly, staring at her hands. There was blood on them, but also freedom, and in the reflection of the metal floor. She saw something new. Not a tool, not a creature, but a protector. A person. Asterisk, the desert wind had long faded when Daron opened the scanner log. He was sitting alone at the hauler's console, his lips still swollen from the fight. Beside him, Rena lay curled in the cot, fast asleep at last, but something from earlier wouldn't leave his mind. During the fight, when she moved her speed, her precision, it was too perfect, not natural, not even for trained soldiers. There was something else at play. Something deeper, darker. Darren sighed and glanced toward her sleeping form. Then, slowly, he picked up the scanner wand from the tool shelf. He didn't want to invade her privacy, but he had to understand what was going on. As gently as possible, he ran the scanner over her left arm. The machine beeped once. Then again, then a soft red flash. An encrypted tag was buried beneath her skin. Darren's eyes widened. This wasn't just a scar or a tracker, it was a full military biocode. Something from an illegal genetics registry, the kind used in black market experiments. He tapped the screen and decrypted a portion. Her code began with X04, rejected specimen. Retired from program E Delta. Below that, small faded text, too emotional. Not suitable for command breeding. Darren leaned back, heart heavy. She wasn't just abandoned, she had been made. Created for a purpose, then thrown away. When? She didn't fit their needs. She had no birth date, no homeworld. No family, just a code, a failed stamp, and pain burned into her memory. Suddenly, he heard movement behind him. Rena stood there, silent, watching. Her eyes were wide, her body stiff. He had hoped she wouldn't wake up. Not during this. She stared at the scanner in his hand, then looked down at her own arm. "You found it," she whispered. Her voice hollow. Darren quickly set the scanner down. "I'm sorry," he said gently. I needed to know what hurt you so much." She didn't yell or cry. She just nodded slowly. Walking over to the wall and leaning against it like the air had left her lungs, "I was born in a lab." She said, eyes unfocused. "I don't remember a mother or a father, just white lights and orders." She touched her arm where the code was hidden. "They trained us to fight, to obey. To breed our emotions were mistakes, things to erase. I cried once during a test," she continued. Voice trembling, "They said I was weak. They shocked me until I stopped crying. After that, I didn't speak for a year." Daron stepped closer, unsure if she wanted comfort or silence. "They tested me again and again," she said, "until I was declared not worthy. One night, they took me on a ship, flew over the dump markets, and kicked me out mid-flight. I rolled into garbage, bleeding, broken. People saw me, stepped over me, like I was nothing." Tears ran down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them. "I didn't ask to be made," she said softly. "I just wanted to be someone real." Darren knelt beside her, not speaking at first. He didn't have the right words. How could he? But then he reached into his tool bag, pulled out a small surgical kit. "I can take the coat out," he said. "Right now?" Her eyes widened. "You'd remove it." "It's not who you are," he said. "It doesn't define you." She sat down slowly, arm trembling as she held it out. He cleaned the area carefully. Her breath came in short gasps, but she didn't pull away. As the blade touched her skin, she closed her eyes. It wasn't the pain that hurt, it was the memory. Every beep, every cut reminded her of white rooms and cold hands. But Darren's hands were warm, gentle, human. It was done in 10 minutes. He pulled out the small chip, black and sharp. He dropped it into a fire dish and crushed it with a metal rod. Rena watched the sparks rise, and with them, something inside her broke loose. The weight of that hidden brand. The silence of being owned. It burned away. "You're free," Darren said softly, wrapping her arm. "I don't know what comes next, but it's yours to choose now." Rena stared at the small fire for a long time, then looked up at him, with eyes filled with something new. Not just fear or sadness, but strength. A quiet, rising strength that had been buried for too long. "You believe I'm a person," she said. Darren nodded. "I believed that from the moment I saw you." She smiled. Just a little, lips trembling. "Then maybe," she whispered. "I can believe it too." That night, she slept on the cot without. Curling into herself, she rested, not just her body, but her heart. And for the first time in her life, she dreamed without chains. The next planet they reached was green and quiet. It wasn't rich or high-tech, but it had something rare: peace. Small farms stretched across the hills. Windmills spun slowly. And people nodded politely as Daron landed the hauler near a supply station. He had work-era delivery of tools and parts to the local mechanic. He thought maybe they could stay for a while. Just long enough for Rena to feel safe. Just long enough for her to breathe. She stepped out of the ship slowly, her cloak gone. Her skin now exposed to the breeze. She didn't hide anymore, not fully. Her eyes scanned the open space. Nervous but curious, children ran past, laughing. A dog barked in the distance. No one screamed when they saw her. No one pointed or called her names. They just looked, then returned to their chores. The village elder approached Iran and asked if the strange woman was with him. He nodded. "She's my partner." The elder shrugged. "Everyone needs someone," he said, and walked away without another word. Rena heard him and blinked, surprised. No disgust, no fear, no rejection. It confused Herb, also warmed something inside her chest. Over the next few days, Rena began to help in small ways. She helped clean the hauler, stacked crates, and even fixed a broken solar panel without being asked. The villagers noticed. An older woman gave her a basket of berries. A child waved at her every morning. Daron smiled as he watched her change. Slowly, like a flower beginning to open after years of cold, but peace doesn't last forever. One night, the wind carried something different, a distant hum in the sky. Rena woke before Daron, her body tense. She stepped outside and stared at the stars. A flash of red light blinked across the clouds, small but sharp. She knew what it meant. They had found her. She ran back inside, heart pounding. "Daron," she whispered, shaking him awake. He sat up fast, sensing her fear. "They're coming," she said. "The ones who made me, they tracked us." Darren's jaw clenched. He grabbed his scanner, ran a sweep, and sure enough, 3 ships entering orbit. Unmarked but unmistakably military. He looked at her. "We need to leave." But she shook her head. "No. They'll follow us always. I don't want to run anymore. You're not safe here," he warned. "No one is. If I leave this unfinished," she said firmly, her voice steady like never before. The villagers gathered when they heard the news. Most looked scared, unsure. The elder asked, "Is it you they're after?" Rena nodded. "I can leave," she offered, "if it protects the village." But the elder raised his hand. "You've worked beside us, protected our children, helped our farms. We do not throw away our own." Her eyes widened, tears filling them, but she didn't cry. She only bowed her head in silent thanks. Darren looked at her with something deeper than admiration. It was pride. This woman, who once couldn't speak, now stood ready to protect others. They started preparing defenses. The villagers didn't have weapons, but they had tools, ropes, old mining traps, and clever hands. Rena helped lead them, teaching them how to build barriers, where to hide, how to strike if needed. No one questioned her, they trusted her. And she stood taller than ever before, her shoulders no longer bent from shame. That evening, she and Duran stood by the hill, watching the stars. He handed her a small metal rod and old energy blade, short range but sharp. She looked at it, then him. "I hope I don't need this," she whispered. "But if I do," she added, "I won't hesitate." He touched her shoulder gently. "You're not alone this time," he said. And for the first time, she believed him fully. The next day, the sky opened. 3 sleek ships landed outside the village. Dark armored figures stepped out, scanning. The lead one spoke into a voice amp. "We've come to retrieve property. Surrender the specimen, and no harm will come." The village stayed silent. Then, the elder stepped forward and said, "She is no one's property. Not anymore." The soldier raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Rena stepped out of the crowd, a blade in hand, eyes glowing. "I am not your tool," she shouted. "I am not your number. I am not your mistake. I am Rena," she said, voice filled with fire. "And I belong to no one but myself." The soldiers raised their weapons, but so did the villagers, spanners, hooks, old blasters, and beside them stood Daron with fire in his eyes, ready to defend the woman who had become more than a passenger, more than a survivor. She had become his family. The village stood still, silent, like the air itself held its breath. The armored soldiers didn't move, their weapons raised but waiting. Across from them, Rena stood tall, blade in hand, blazing with purpose. Behind her, Daron stood, strong, and the villagers flanked them with farming tools and courage. No one had expected this moment to come so fast. But no one ran, not this time. The lead soldier took one step forward. He pointed at Rena with a cold metal finger. "You are a legal property of Program A Delta," he said, voice robotic. "You are to be retrieved for reassignment or disposal." Rena didn't flinch. "I am not your property," she replied, voice calm. "I'm not a thing you can order." The soldier hesitated. She wasn't the trembling girl from the old records. She wasn't the silent creature they had thrown away. She had changed, more than they had expected, more than they understood. Suddenly, the second soldier aimed his blaster, fired, but Rena was faster. She dropped, rolled, and the shot missed her by inches. Daron pulled his emergency shield forward, protecting 2 villagers. Chaos erupted. Smoke bombs burst in the air. Villagers scattered and fought. Traps Rena had helped build sprang to life. One soldier fell into a deep pit lined with metal rods. Another got tangled in a weighted net, slammed to the ground with a thud. But the lead soldier reached Rena. He swung a plasma rod at her, sparks flying. She dodged left, then right, then caught his arm with her bare hands. Their eyes met. She saw nothing in his, no feeling, no soul, just the machine behind the mask. "You erased me once," she whispered as she kicked him back, but not again. With a sharp cry, she slashed his power cable. The weapon short-circuited. He staggered, then collapsed, sparks flying from his armor as the smoke cleared. The last soldier tried to retreat to the ship, but the villagers stood in his way, blocking his escape. This was their home, and Rena was now one of them. He dropped his weapon, raised his hands, and ran. Victory was quiet at first. No cheers, No wild celebration, just heavy breaths and disbelief. They had one together. They had driven out trained hunters because they stood as one, because they stood with her. Rena stood still, her hands shaking now that the danger had passed. She looked down at the weapon in her hands, then dropped it. It clattered on the ground like an old chain falling away. She didn't want to be a weapon. Not anymore. Darren approached her carefully. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" he asked gently. She nodded slowly, then looked at the villagers. Many were bruised, dirty, tired but alive, all alive. "I brought danger here," she said softly, her voice cracking. "No," the elder replied. Stepping forward, "You brought strength. You taught us how to protect ourselves, and you stood with us." He looked at her with a kind smile. "You didn't just become one of us. Rena, you made us better." Her heart felt heavy and light at the same time. She wasn't used to praise, wasn't used to being seen as good. But now, she couldn't deny the truth. She had made a choice not to run, not to obey, but to protect, to stand, to believe. Later that evening, while the fires burned low and food was shared among the villagers, Rena sat with Duran. The steps of the storage hut. He passed her a bowl of soup, and she took it with steady hands. The stars above them blinked quietly. "Do you want to keep moving?" he asked softly. "We can leave tomorrow, find a new place, maybe settle somewhere safer." She shook her head. "No more running," she said. "I've run enough for 10 lives. I want to stay." He looked at her, surprised. "With these people?" "With these people," she nodded. "And with you." There was silence between them, soft, warm, full of meaning. Then she added, "This village." They looked at me and didn't see a weapon, didn't see a tool. They saw a woman with scars and didn't turn away. They gave me something I never had. "What's that?" Darren asked gently. "A place," she whispered. "To belong." He smiled, leaning back. "And if someone ever comes again?" he asked. She grinned for the first time, small but real. "Then they'll learn what happens when you try to steal someone from their home, from her home." The word tasted strange on her tongue, but right. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living. She had made her choice, and it was hers alone. Days passed, then weeks, and the village slowly returned to peace. The fields were planted again, the children played without fear, and the skies stayed clear. The memory of the battle became a quiet story shared around evening fires, but in every version, one name was always spoken with respect: Rena. She didn't hide anymore. She walked through the village with her head high. She helped fix roofs, taught young ones how to set up alarms, and even shared soft smiles with the elders to the villagers. She was no longer strange. She was one of them, and Duran, he stayed. His hauler sat unused for days, then weeks. He was supposed to be a traveler, a wanderer, but now he found himself building a shelter beside the farming ridge, not just a stopover, not just a camp, a home. One morning, while repairing the solar pump, a government ship arrived. It landed just outside the village, not like the raiders, but official.com, clean. Out stepped a tall woman in a blue uniform, a badge pinned to her chest. She walked with purpose toward the village square. Rena stood nearby, watching carefully, her body tensed. The woman introduced herself. "Colonial Records Division," she said, holding a data pad. "We picked up signal conflict in this region and tracked energy weapons. To this location, is everything under control now?" Duran stepped forward and nodded. "There was an attack. We defended the village. It's safe now." The officer looked at Rena with professional interest. "And you?" she asked. "Name and registration." Rena took a breath, then stepped forward. "I have no code," she said clearly. "No registration." The officer raised an eyebrow. "No identification." "Then how do you legally reside on this colony?" The village elder stepped forward. "She's with us," he said firmly. "She helped save our people." Another villager added, "She bled for us, taught us, protected our children. She's family now," said a young woman, holding a baby on her hip. The officer hesitated. "We still need a record," she said. "We don't allow undocumented persons." Then Duran stepped beside Rena and said, "She's not undocumented. She's my family." The officer blinked. "Family?" He nodded. "She's my partner, my choice." Rena turned to look at him. Eyes wide, his voice was steady, filled with truth. "I choose her," he said. "As my family, my equal." For a moment, no one spoke. The officer looked at them both, then at the villagers standing behind them. Silent and strong. Finally, she sighed, typed something into her pad, and nodded. "Then I'll mark her as registered under personal bond protection. She'll have full rights as your partner, resident of this colony." She turned and walked back to her ship. No ceremony, no applause, just the quiet sound of justice being done. A door opening where before there had only been chains. That night, Rena sat beside the fire, the stars above her, soft and distant. Duran passed her a bowl of soup, like always, but this time she didn't take it with hesitation. She smiled, a true, gentle smile, and accepted it like someone who finally knew they belonged. "You didn't have to say that," she whispered. "I wanted to." He replied, "Because it's true." She looked at her hands, once used only for pain, now used for building, holding, healing. "I never thought I could be chosen," she said softly. "You were never unworthy," he answered. "They just never saw you for who you are." The fire crackled between them. Then from the corner, a small child ran up and tugged at Rena's hand. It was the same little girl who had once feared her. Now she smiled wide and held up a drawing, a stick figure picture, childish and messy. It showed a woman with long silver hair standing beside a man with brown eyes. Above them, written in shaky letters, "My new family." Rena's heart caught in her throat. She knelt down, took the child in her arms, and held her close. "I never had this before," she whispered to Duran, tears forming in her glowing eyes. "And now?" he asked, kneeling beside her. She looked at the drawing again, then at the villagers smiling in the distance, then at him. "I have everything," she said, voice full of quiet joy. "Everything I thought I could never have." She was not trash, she was not a number, she was not broken. She was loved, she was trusted, she was home.